What makes the post amazing is Kay basically says, fuck it, print it anyway, even though we know that we could be held in contempt of court and go to prison. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Real Impact. I'm your host, Tom Bilyeu, and I took myself from scrounging on my couch cushions to find enough change to put gas in my car to building a billion-dollar business, largely off the back of things that I learned from film, comic books, etc. And now my goal is to create a show where you can see how much knowledge you can extract from movies, TVs, etc. I am flanked on my left by Dr. Finesse and on my right by Casey Files Elliott, and we're diving in today to the one, the only, the post. Spoiler alert. We're going to be going hard on this mofo. I think there is a lot of stuff to talk about. And without further ado, segment one is impressions. Christopher, what did you think?
I'm going to hop right in and say I love this film. Loved it. Did
you love it the most?
The most out of all these Academy films, or just the most?
Just the most.
Just the mostest.
Did you love the post the most?
It's definitely up there.
Nice.
I mean, you can't. You can't go wrong with Spielberg. You can't go wrong with Hanks. You can't go wrong with Streep. Slap them all together, man. It is a jambalaya of just deliciousness. So I was all about it. And this movie was definitely special to me. I've mentioned this before, that I went to school for journalism. I got my degree in broadcast journalism. I started out as a journalist. And the one thing that you learn in journalism is the high cost of truth. And being the watchdog of the government, that's how journalism was brought about. And one of the first things that I learned in my major curriculum in journalism was the Pentagon Papers, and how the government essentially, you can't take everything the government says. You have to question everything, hold them accountable.
In journalism school, do they literally a lot of these stories revolve around people ultimately having to come to the conclusion of, do I go to jail to protect my source? Do I leak documents? Do they actually teach that?
They actually teach you that. Yeah.
Really?
At least in my curriculum. It turns you into conspiracy theorists, because they just teach you that everything that's told to you is not necessarily true.
Do you know, in the movie, the Nixon voice, was that actually the tapes?
Wait, was it actually the tapes?
I'm pretty sure.
It seemed
I hope I'm not
like
wrong.
it.
I'm pretty sure I read that that's his real voice. Those are the real tapes.
Either that's really the tapes, or they did the world's best job of making it seem like it. I was like, whoa.
It did sound a lot like him. I just assumed it was an actor.
Should we record the president? What do you think?
Oh my God.
Should that be a thing?
That's tough. I don't know.
Why did he do it? Do you know why Nixon himself recorded?
Well,
he must have had some rationale.
Well, it's one of the things that I've heard. It's a legacy thing. Like, I'm going to record what I'm talking about. People can go back and look what I did and look what I said.
It worked. It wasn't quite the legacy he was looking for, but it worked.
Yeah. It's just one of those things. You know what I mean? And it's ridiculous, because how many times has recording his voice tripped him up? Like, in history, when you look at the books, and down to Watergate, down to this, down to a bunch of other things, down to even the whole Elvis fiasco.
Yeah.
Wait. Not that I want to derail, but what's the Elvis fiasco?
Oh, yeah. Elvis came and met with President Nixon. And actually, they even did a movie on it that I don't even know if anyone saw it. I didn't see it. They just recently did a movie on Elvis's journey to the White House to meet with the president. Which is fascinating. It's a fascinating story all around. I mean, I don't want to derail it and get fully into it.
Weird.
I mean, it's even down to Elvis walking into the White House with the gun. It's just so much to it.
What?
Yeah. Elvis had a historic moment where he met with President Nixon.
Crazy.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
All right, Files, what'd you think?
I also loved the movie, loved Meryl, and that's, I know, such a obvious thing to say, but here's my controversial statement. Meryl's not always great. Case in point, Mamma Mia.
Shame on you. I haven't seen Mamma Mia, so I can't say
Sometimes Meryl, you should say no. But she is amazing in this. I just love the subtlety of the performance. And I identified, my life is nothing like the life of her character, but I identified with the struggle that she went through, and how nervous and hard it was for her to take on this role and suddenly assert her power. And that decision she ultimately has to make between the greater good of revealing the truth to the rest of the world versus how that's going to hurt her own family. So I love this movie. I have a friend that told me she hated it, and I'm still angry about it.
What?
Because I don't know how that's possible.
Well, so let me break down how somebody could be unhappy with this film. So
Whoa.
I know. So first, let me say that each individual piece I actually liked.
Okay.
So Spielberg was taking chances. The beginning of the movie felt almost like a student film. It was like kind of not uncontrolled clumsy, very intentionally like drawing attention to like the imperfections of the filmmaking process. It almost felt like it was shot in the 70s.
Okay.
This did take place in the 70s, right? Not
Yes.
getting my time on.
Yes.
Okay, so I was like, 60s, 70s. So
And maybe
I
I'll
loved
say,
that.
maybe that's also because one thing I loved was how clumsy Meryl was at the beginning.
Oh, she
as
was-
Kay.
yeah.
Her performance was amazing.
But maybe that
Literally-
was part of tying all that together. Like, she is not this fully formed person yet.
and that isn't my beef.
Okay.
My beef is that this to me, and I know this is where we're going, like the whole thing about the high cost of truth and all that, I feel like that would have been a film. And then what this film to me should have been is about transformation. But you don't really catch the momentum of her transformation till the last third of the film. And that to me was amazing. And Meryl was unstoppable. It was revelatory from a character perspective. It is some of the finest acting I've ever seen, even from Meryl. I was like,
Yeah.
how the fuck do you embody, like, how do you make yourself nervous? So she
Yes.
was the, like, anxiety
rubbing her hands
equivalent
together.
of, did you guys see Seven?
Yes.
Okay, the guy that is forced to rape the woman with the knife.
Yes.
Like, does that guy need counseling after that performance?
I need counseling
He
just
for
thinking
real,
about it.
right? He
Yeah.
for real seemed broken.
Oh, yeah.
In a way that I was like, that's not acting. Like, he's for real broken.
Yeah.
It was crazy.
Yeah.
So she captured like the anxiety of her role so well, and because I think anyway, of Meryl is like incredibly powerful and like such a profound presence. That my brain, it's kind of like when you think you're about to drink 7-Up, but you drink water, and like that really jarring moment. I
horrible.
kept expecting, horrific. I kept expecting her character to be that really powerful because the way they frame her in the trailer, you think she's going to be this badass. And you realize, wait,
Trailers
no, she's-
ruining movies.
Oh, in this
No.
case,
Since the beginning of
totally set
time.
me
You know,
up
it's
on
so funny because it sets you up to think she's a badass.
100%.
Like the editing makes it sound like, I think it was Bradley Whitford's character says something very demeaning to her and very male chauvinistic to her. And in the trailer, she just goes,
Thank you for your
Thank
candid
you.
feedback.
yeah. And it sounds like she's being very coy and saying like, no,
100%.
I'm about to do my shit. But no, but when you watch the movie, she's being very submissive. You're like, wait, what? Wow. The trailer
Yeah.
really, it's insane.
And so that actually fucked me up.
Yeah.
And that was jarring to me. And I felt like they were telling two different movies. And so, like, I actually enjoyed both movies. I
Okay.
liked the conspiracy theory. I loved her transformation. They just didn't quite come together for me in, like, a great film. So at the end of this, I was, like, a little bummed. Because either one of those films, like a full exploration of, like, the conspiracy, the what's going on from a journalistic standpoint, what it means to really face jail time, like, and I'm assuming, I actually haven't looked at the notes. I'm assuming that's our like, would we do it, right? Yeah. So we're gonna debate the shit out of that. Like, would you guys do it, right? Like, that is fucking interesting.
Oh, yeah.
But they were trying to balance between what Kay's doing, her character, what that would be like, that transformation, and then the whole backdrop. And I just felt like they didn't find the balance.
Oh, wow. I did not feel that way. I mean, I get what you're, now that you're saying it, I get where you're coming from completely. But I still love the film. And I feel like it was kind of what you alluded to, intentional clumsiness on Spielberg's part.
I totally get what you mean by that, and I don't want people to take away. This really was intentional. Spielberg felt in total control the whole time. I think they did exactly what they set out to do, and I'm not negative on the movie, but it's because, like you were saying in the beginning, this is Spielberg, this is Streep, this is Hanks. Like I was ready to be putty in their hands. And
You were underwhelmed.
Underwhelmed a little. It's a good movie. It's going to get a thumbs up
Okay.
from me.
Okay.
Like I told Lisa.
Spoiler
I said,
alert on the rating.
Spoiler alert on her own. Like things here, but I told Lisa she needs to watch it. I think it's a good movie.
Yeah.
It's solid.
Yeah.
If it wins a bunch of awards, I won't be surprised, especially for acting. But yeah, just for me, the balance wasn't right.
Wow. That's pretty fascinating. Yeah, I mean, Hanks could do no wrong for me. Streep, you know, I'm not a huge Streep fan. People want to kill me when I say that. I've never
Look
been.
at
That's
us with the
actually
hot
what I
takes
want
on
to
Meryl
kill you.
Streep.
Yeah.
Like how can you not like
I'm
Streep?
just not. just what you said earlier. She's not always great in everything she does.
But when
Streep
she
could do a
is
movie.
great.
I just think Streep's not all that. Streep could do a movie about a homeless person who's mute, who just sits on a stoop all day, and then people are like, nomination. And you know she's going to get a nomination. That's just how it is. Maybe because she's truly that great. I don't think she's that great. My wife, she gets so angry every time Streep gets nominated. She thinks it's ridiculous. Wow. And I will say that she doesn't even think Streep is good in this film.
What?
She does not.
Brenda?
Yeah, exactly.
Brenda.
That's Brenda, though. She just does not. She's not feeling the Streep.
If I needed a 14-year-old Cambodian boy, I would cast Meryl Streep. Like,
that's amazing.
just Meryl, fuck, man.
Yeah.
I
literally.
need you to see Mamma Mia and tell me that she did a good job at that.
Now I want to protect my vision and not watch that. But
Mamma
she,
Mia.
just
That's
like
amazing.
on the whole, it is untouchable. All right, let's dive in. Our next segment, Cold Stone Themery.
The best
Break it
title.
down for us.
We have hinted that a main theme of the film is transformation. Meryl Streep's character goes through a huge transformation in the film. Let's discuss.
Yeah, she does. I'll say that sometimes when you're faced with adversity, it's a good jumping point to show what you're capable of. You know what I mean? Because some people fold under pressure. Some people figure it out. Some people are closers. Some people are cleaners.
Did you know this? Nice Tim Grover reference, my man. Which, by the way, read the book Relentless. Absolutely amazing, talking about like what it takes for people to really make transformation. But did you know the story in the movie beforehand? Like at the end, did you know what choice she made?
Oh yeah, 100%. Because remember, that's the first thing I learned in my journalism curriculum. The first thing, the Pentagon Papers, questioning the government. Again, it sounds like I'm a conspiracy theorist, but that's what journalism is.
And didn't you say literally before we started rolling that you are a conspiracy theorist?
I am a conspiracy theorist. Yes, I am. Yes, I am. But yes, I
In
knew
fact, he
everything
wanted
about
to title the episode "The Government is Lying to You."
I did.
And we're
I
like,
did.
yeah, everybody. What'd you say? Like, yeah, obviously.
Yeah, of course.
Right. So we feared that wasn't catching up.
Of course.
No, but yeah, I knew everything about this. Everything going in. I was excited. Just knowing what was going to happen was very exciting to me. And it's just one of those things in history that you would think more people knew about, but they don't. And Ken Burns just did a great documentary called The Vietnam War, and there's an entire episode dedicated to the Pentagon Papers for the most part. So yeah, I knew about it. And so knowing that Meryl
This
Streep's
is
character-
when people talk about the Pentagon Papers, this is what they're talking about?
This is what they're talking about.
See, I didn't know that the Post was involved. I've obviously heard 1,000 times about the Pentagon Papers. I had no idea this was the story of the Pentagon Papers
exactly
or
what
like
it
how
is.
this all played out. So I was literally
we
holding my
shouldn't
breath.
shortchange the New York Times because they actually discovered it originally and
course.
first posted
Right.
it. So,
But-
and I think there's some beef.
Files,
Some
they
of-
fucking backed down.
Yes.
Which I
They
was
did.
That's
shocked
the
by
big
in the
thing.
movie. I was like,
I'm just
what?
saying they're a little
Because
angry
Here,
to be such small role in
what?
this.
Like,
Wow.
literally, so assuming that the movie accurately portrays, what makes the Post amazing is Kay basically says, fuck it, print
Yeah.
it anyway, even though we know that we
Yes.
could be held in contempt of court and go to prison. Which is exactly what they backed off on.
Yes.
So look, I'm not taking anything away from the New York Times as like an entity over time. They've done amazing things. I'm just saying in the scope of this movie, the moment is being willing to stand up to
Yeah.
that.
And that's the thing, too. The New York Times, they were being journalists, true journalists, being watchdogs of the government, publishing what they publish, right? But at the same time, when they were tested, and their credibility of being great journalists was put under fire, they backed down. You know what I mean?
Weren't they still in the ultimate court ruling?
Yes.
Like they were tied up in the legalities of it as the
Of course.
first paper to do it.
Yes.
And
of
so
course.
they needed another paper, which they really go into in the film later. One
And
of my
other
favorite
papers
parts, I'll
follow
save it.
suit,
But
yeah.
they needed another paper to be like, no, you can't do this. You can't silence us.
Mm-hmm. Yes, exactly.
So they started the ball rolling.
Exactly. But I think this is why Kay deserves a movie about her. Because she rises up, and you know what you said earlier, there is a bit of transformation there. Because in the movie, it's set up that there's nepotism involved. She inherits this paper, and you think that she's not worthy of running a paper and being the decision maker. And
let's
so
be honest, in the beginning, she's not.
she's not. She absolutely isn't.
I mean, that's what makes like this whole story of transformation so interesting. And is why I wish that it had been the primary focus of the film. She is not capable of running the paper. And this is what I find so fascinating about human transformation is most people believe that whoever they are right now today is a permanent state of affairs and that they are never going to get better. And so talking about the high cost of truth, dude, let's abstract it for a second from the high cost that the film is literally talking about to the real high cost of like internal truth of really being willing to look at yourself. The high cost of truth is it hurts, man. And it actually destroys a lot of people because their self-esteem is so wrapped up in the fact that, oh shit, I'm acknowledging that I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, and that they think that's a permanent state of affairs. So if you think like that, the high cost of truth is literally you're silenced, you're shut down from yourself, like from inside. But the reality is that's not true. You can get better at anything that you set your mind to. And so what I love about this movie and why I so wanted it to really be Meryl's character Kay, why I wanted it to be her story is she shows even like the weakest person with everything working against her. She tries at the beginning to like, because I thought, oh, she's going to like crush it in the boardroom. We're going to see the flip. And she fucks it up. And the guy has to come in to rescue her. And then in the end, like she has not a hard choice to make. Like one of the hardest choices any human being will ever have to face outside of something that is truly life or death, which is I may lose the company that my family built for generations and my family's livelihood and I might go to prison. And she still has the guts to make that call. And you see her realize just because historically I've not been the person that I was proud of, I can become the person that I'm proud of. And that it happens like that. It's one decision. Now, usually that decision is just to go learn, grow, get better, but it starts with acknowledging the truth.
You know, one thing I really loved, one of my favorite scenes in the film, Sarah Paulson plays Tom Hanks' wife in the film, and they have
Which were you asking why was she cast? Like she's
because
so
it's
good.
Yeah.
And then,
I'm like,
yeah.
and then she gets this great moment to explain. I just love this because I feel like this is so true still today. She gets to explain to him why this is such a brave decision, a brave position for Kay to take. Why, like, when you're so, I love the way I don't have the exact quote, but she says to him basically, when people look at you like you're nothing, like that's the bravest thing is to.
It's hard not to begin to believe it yourself.
Yep.
That moment was so good. Literally, I have the chills. I was like, Sarah Paulson, is that her name? So she's amazing. Did you guys see Studio 50 on the Sunset Strip?
Yep.
Not the whole
So good, and I'm mortified it was canceled. Literally, I'm still angry to this day.
It's a great show.
Was so good. Aaron Sorkin.
On crack.
And she was phenomenal in that show. And
People versus OJ.
so now,
as
yes,
Marsha Clark.
and then in that, amazing in that. And so when I saw her as like a background character who's literally doing nothing, I was like,
I was a little surprised.
You know what I thought? I thought, wow, when you're Steven Spielberg, literally every part in the movie is played by an amazing person.
Which is very true.
Allison Brie,
Yeah.
Jesse Plemons,
Yes.
like a
Jesse
million
Plemons
other
is
people that I'm not
fantastic.
thinking of.
now who's Jesse Plemons? Better Call
the
He
Saul.
plays
lawyer?
the lawyer.
Who's Better Call Saul? What's his real name?
Bob
Odenkirk.
Yeah.
He,
Yeah.
of course.
Yeah.
He
But
was
that's
great.
a big meaty role.
Yeah, he has
as a supporting.
So wait,
Exactly.
who's the lawyer?
yeah,
The lawyer, the
Their
young guy.
lawyer.
He's like, how old are you?
Also from Breaking Bad.
Yes.
And well,
Well, he
Friday
had-
Night Lights.
I haven't
That's
seen
what
that.
I think of. Yeah.
He's in Friday Night
Landry.
Lights.
Yeah.
Landry.
I was
He
thinking
has
of him
just
as like the super sketchy kid from Breaking Bad.
No,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love that he's exploded. He's everywhere now.
Oh,
It
he's
makes me
everywhere.
so happy. I love him.
And I always say this when people laugh at me. He looks like he could be Matt Damon's brother.
Yes.
He really does.
Now that his face is a little
Yeah.
rounder for
Yeah.
Schways.
He comes from the school of Matt Damon acting.
But yeah, so it's just like Spielberg will it must be nice to like have amazing actors at your beck and call to fill every role.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
But she then has her moment, and I thought, okay, now
Yes.
I get it.
Yes. Totally.
Because that moment is so pivotal and had to come from somebody. It had to be a woman, and it can't be
Yes.
from Kay. So it's like you're kind of trapped.
And there's so few, as it would have been, there are so few women in the film. And I loved how they, like, every big moment for Kay was this claustrophobic moment of I'm surrounded by men. I'm the only female in this room, like from when she first goes in to go over her notes about what she's going to say when they go public, to like every scene from that when she walks into the courtroom and it's all men, just like every moment. And so having that clutch female character to express what I think a lot of the men at the time couldn't even comprehend
Yeah.
how hard it was for her.
Yeah, exactly. And what's amazing about this film, I guess, as filmmakers, Steven Spielberg being the filmmaker, he never mentions it. He never has anyone mention it in the film. But what was going on in the early 70s, women were burning their bras. Women finally were stepping up and saying, look, this is not a man's world. This is our world, too. We're not stay-at-home wives who just do nothing. We are working women. It was a huge movement in American history for women at this time. So it's significant having that in the back of your head, if you know about that, and most people, I guess I'll take it for granted and say that I think people know that. Watching the film, it even sits more. It's a pretty thought to think, wow, this is a big moment for Meryl Streep's character right now because of what's going on.
And there's only one moment in the movie where they hint at that.
Yeah.
When she comes back out of the courtroom and she goes down the stairs and it's just all women.
Yep.
Looking at her like, yeah, girl.
Yeah.
Yeah, you got a sense of them having a hero, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah.
Totally.
And it was such a quiet moment, right?
Very quiet.
Just a silent shot down, and they're all, if I remember right, it's like they're the only ones whose attention is fully on her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so it was a really cool.
And we'd had
visual
other
moment.
moments where she got sent to like the scene where I think it's some dinner party and the men and women separate. And you're just like, oh,
Yeah.
it just felt gross
So
watching
that's,
it.
So that's why that's what I enjoyed about the film. It was subtle, but it was like her transformation epitomized what was happening. It's like sign of the times, what was happening in the world, most certainly what was happening in the United States at that time. And she was faced with so much threat, sub-threat with men being like, this is our world, but at the same time, you got to remember, coming out of the 60s, this was like post-McCarthy era, where people were terrified of the government, terrified of the power of the government and the U.S. government and what they can do to you. So besides the fact that she was a woman in a man's world, she was a woman in a world of a terrifying government and what they can do to you. People knew about the conspiracy of JFK getting assassinated. Martin Luther King's getting assassinated. There's a conspiracy there. Robert F. Kennedy's getting assassinated. It's a volatile time. We're coming out of the tumultuous 60s, and you're in the 70s with a president like Nixon, who was, in a sense, a bully, and we see it. He's a bully to the post. They can't come in here. I want them banned, this and that, so on. And she was faced with a lot of threat, but it's subtle the way it's told in here. But knowing it, it makes her transformation that much more
One thing I also love about her transformation is that she's got to be in her mid 60s in the movie. And I get hit up all the time with people asking me like, hey, I want to make a change. I want to do something. I'm in
Just
my
recently.
50s. Yeah.
Yeah.
And like my life hasn't become what I wanted it to become. Is it too late for me? And so to see somebody make such a radical change, take what is arguably the biggest risk of her entire life in her 60s, was really cool. And I love that because there isn't, first of all, the future's not guaranteed to any of us, right? I always tell people I live between the friction of I plan to live forever, but I know that I could die before the end of this segment from an aneurysm. So it's like, you have to know that the future's not guaranteed for anybody.
No.
So, but as you get older, it's like the end is closer, no matter how you shake it or bake it. So that, to see her be willing to change so dramatically, to find self-pride at that stage in her life where so many people just resign themselves to, well, there's so much momentum in my personality, such an expectation from my friends, and the way that they shoot that scene, literally, they're all there, right? You talk about that oppressive nature of her being the only female, and because it comes on the back of a formal thing, she's in this really weird dress, and so she stands out like a sore thumb, and they're all just there, you're making a catastrophic error, and she gets that moment where it's it's almost easy to be ballsy for a second. It's a whole nother thing when you get a chance to reconsider. And people are she makes the decision, but then she has a chance to reconsider, and they're all you need to reconsider. And she's still oh, it was so great. I love that. That's transformation. That's fine. All right. Next up, we've got What Would You Do? Now, hinted earlier, we know what this is going to be, but take it away.
I think there's only one question. The most important decision of the film: would you publish the Pentagon Papers?
Knowing that you might go to prison.
Oh yeah. Casey, I want to hear what would you do?
Wow.
Yeah.
You're starting with me. All right. Well, I mean, there's no other way to go about it. I am obsessed with the truth. I am a fact finder. I hate when I have to decide something without having as many facts as possible. So the idea of hiding something, keeping something hidden that the rest of the world should know, not giving an accurate picture of how things actually are. And in fact, just last night, I don't know if either of you have seen Errol Morris's documentary, The Fog of War.
Yes.
It's one of my favorite documentaries. It's amazing.
Fantastic.
Must see it.
More
Bring
people
it for
need to
you.
watch that.
It's basically an
Netflix now.
interview. Oh, is it? Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
It's basically an interview with Robert McNamara. And it's like his 11, I think, lessons on war. So obviously they spend a big portion of the film talking about what happened in Vietnam.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just to know that they were sending soldiers to Vietnam knowing there was no way we could win, just to save face for America. And I'm simplifying it. There were a lot of other issues, but if you find that out, I don't know how you don't say the truth to the rest of America. That's just not a secret you can keep. So yeah, I would definitely publish the papers. Even when, now it's not that it's going to be a tough decision. And if you're Kay, you're risking your paper, your family, but that's her. If she is truly a journalist at heart, even though she's literally more the publisher, the owner of the paper, there's no other decision she could make.
I don't think she is a journalist at heart. Like in real life, I don't think that woman would have considered herself a journalist.
I will say she actually was I read the little, as I just said, I like to find out the facts. I did a little research this morning, and one thing that a few people, they think overall that the film does her justice, but one thing that we don't get in the film is that when she was younger, before she found her husband, she actually was actively interested in journalism, and she worked at a newspaper. She wasn't like a, I don't know you would know this better. I don't know the positions, the titles, but I don't think she moved up to like a top journalist, but she did work at a paper, was actively interested in running the paper. And then she got married, and her father was just like, sorry, you're a wife now. Like basically was just like, I'm giving the paper to your husband. And that was that. So I like to think, I want to go read her autobiography now to get a better sense, but
fantastic.
I like to think that this was always within her, that spirit of journalism, and this was her chance to finally make that decision and to speak her truth, as Oprah says.
It's really interesting. So I actually didn't read this as like a journalistic choice. I read it as finally somebody who knew what the right thing to do was, right? I mean, objectively standing up to a bully is the right answer. And for the first time wanted to do something that made her proud of herself. And that was how I read it, which is interesting. I find it more fascinating when it's one of those like, because I think honestly the only thing in life that matters is what you think about yourself in the quiet moments when no one's around. Because facing prison is no fucking joke. And somebody even says in the film like, oh, it's an easy decision in theory, it's a lot harder in practice.
Yes.
Yeah.
When like you're actually staring at prison time.
Yeah.
And I thought, this in the abstract, this is very easy. This is very easy for the three of us to answer. It's a whole different scenario. Like if I was really thinking, fuck, I would go to jail. I would lose my livelihood. My wife now is going to have to go fend for herself. I'm not even going to be there to help. Like that gets really hard. But I know that at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is what I think about myself when I'm by myself. Then there becomes truly only one answer. But like if you've been training since you were in college and you've like drawn a line in the sand for yourself and you've built a whole belief system around this is what I would do in the face of that hard thing, it's actually easier, right? Which is why I think bright lines are so powerful. A belief system is so powerful. Everybody needs to have a set of values that they acknowledge and live by. But at least as painted in the movie, that isn't the case. So it becomes like this really interesting moment of a woman who's going to decide her value system in that moment.
Yeah. You know, it's tough, and you hit it on the head. We can sit here and say, oh, yeah, I'll tell the truth. That's what I would do. But I mean, we got to think about, what it was like to live during that time when the government had such a hold on you. And they were considered so powerful. I mean, still considered so powerful, but no one had done anything like this before. There wasn't any huge precedent. You know what I mean? Someone makes the point, and it was a big argument during the time, but there's a line in the movie that mentions if you knew that we were going to invade, that the Japanese were going to invade Pearl Harbor or whatever, or it wasn't that. No, it was D-Day. It was D-Day. Sorry.
Yeah. If you knew all the secret plans to D-Day, would you reveal them?
Exactly. Yeah. So, and that's a legitimate statement. It's really legitimate because that's what it comes down to. And, we hear about all the time that journalists sometimes have gone too far. WikiLeaks right now, what's going on with WikiLeaks, that's gone too far. It's national security that you have to you just have to consider national security. You just can't go in blindly and say, like, this is what's happening. Another thing that I mentioned in the film, one thing that happened after the Pentagon paper leak, everyone followed suit.
Yeah.
So suddenly, journalism practice goes into full effect. We become, again, the watchdog of the government. So much so, journalists are going to Vietnam and not just reporting on they're not just documenting what they're seeing. They're telling truth. They're sending back. There's so many stories about what happens right after this in Vietnam and what journalists are doing. But of course, all the generals and then the government saying, wow, you're really compromising our strategy because everyone knows where we're going. So here we are trying to sneak into this village here and do this. And we have a whole plan, a whole tactical plan. And suddenly on the news, everyone knows what we're doing, right? So there's a lot of issues at stake here. You just can't go in and say, like, okay, this is what we're going to report. So I understand how it could be a big decision to leak the Pentagon Papers. That's a big thing. Mm-hmm. Huge thing.
I think they address it really well, though, in the movie and say, look, if we had something that was about to happen and we leaked it, that's a totally different scenario than a retrospective looking back, analyzing what we did do.
And to be like, you are actively, and by you I mean the President of the United States, is actively trying to silence the press. Mm-hmm. Things that are happening today in our world. So that's where the line had to be drawn in the sand.
For sure.
We can't allow this to happen.
No.
And that's why one thing I love about how Meryl's character was shot is throughout the film, she is sitting or below. And all the men are towering over, and the shot is always just so she's just I specifically remember the scene where she's talking to McNamara about she can't believe these things she's learned and what should she do and whatever. And he's just really menacing above her, and they're supposed to be, friends.
And he's standing, Yeah.
And then at the end, after she's finally made the decision to publish the second time, there's a shot where all the newspapers who've followed suit are on the couch, and her and Tom, I think this is the first shot where it's from below, and you see Meryl and Tom, they're of equal stature.
That's interesting.
And then Tom Hanks literally copies her stance. Huh. So she's already kind of standing like this, looking very triumphant, and he's like this, and he looks at her and goes, and I'm like, yes,
I see
these
you,
little
Spielberg.
touches.
I see what you're doing, Spielberg. That's pretty amazing.
She stepped into that role.
The detail.
She fulfilled it, and she made the right decision.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, for sure. But so I would tell the truth, and I would leak those papers. Truth is important. Hell yeah. No questions asked.
Respect.
Yeah.
All right, it's time for Case Closed, where we take something from the movie and we debate it.
Exactly.
Let's get in.
Exactly. So, obviously, we've kind of already touched on this. You have to take a lot of risk to make the decision that Meryl makes in the film, but also a lot of the actual history was people willing to take a major risk for the greater good of others. Yeah. So let's just talk about is that true? If you really want to do something great in your life, do you have to take major risks, or is it better to analyze the situation, move forward from there?
Oh, wow.
That question makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. That
do you have big risk for big success?
Yeah.
Yes or no?
Yeah. I mean, look, you found a lot of big success. More so than we have. That's just plain and simple. I could imagine you've taken a lot of risks.
Well, so I'll happily give my answer, but what's your answer? What do you think?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. You've got to take risks. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, everyone is so afraid to take risks because it all comes down to failure. Because when you take a risk, you're going to fail. And I hear you say this all the time. Sometimes I'm always like, ugh. You're like, oh, you're going to fail. I'm like, oh, don't say that. I don't want to fail. Because it's terrifying. That's why people don't take risks, because they don't want to fail. Failing does not feel good. Even if you know there's an end game of success, failure feels awful. But some people thrive off of failure. I'm not that person. So taking risks, oh man, it's terrifying. It's one of the scariest things to do. And I got to remind myself daily, take a risk. I wake up in the morning and sometimes I try to think, what can I do today that's risk worthy? What can I do? You know, I book for Impact Theory, one of our other shows. And all the time I'm like, man, okay, this person already said no to me. Do I take a risk and annoy them by reaching out again and saying like, hey, you want to do this show? And sometimes I do it, sometimes I don't. So I think if you are trying to push yourself forward, if you're trying to get some type of success, if you're trying to get to the truth, whatever, you've got to take a risk and not be afraid of it. Because the worst thing that could happen to you is you can fail, but move on beyond it because you're going to live. You're going to live. You're not going to die. That's what you got to tell yourself. I'm not going to die. Of course, there's a risk of jumping off a bridge, literally, and killing yourself. But then the everyday risk that people are so afraid to take because they think it's going to end with just the biggest defeat, you're still going to be alive. You're going to wake up the next day. You're going to smile. Take that risk. And I got to remind myself of that daily because I'm not a risk taker, but I'm trying to be more so. And I think you can be too.
Yeah, this is something I struggle with all the time because, as I mentioned, I'm very careful.
But do you think you need to take a risk?
Oh, getting there, Tom Billieu.
All right.
I struggle with this. It's hard for me personally. Yeah, because I like to know everything before I make a decision. I'm just,
really?
It's hard for me to make a decision if I think there are factors that I don't know. Even if it's like something that it's going to be impossible for me to know. So I struggle with this. But yes, I mean, I do agree. The only way to like make leaps and bounds in life, in your own success and whatever you're trying to do is to take a risk. You're not going to get there doing what everyone else has done. And there's something to that, like that. I don't know, that's not a saying, but there's something to like being the first at something. That's when you've really done something.
Yeah.
Because you did something that no one else was willing to do. Either everyone else was afraid to do it, they never saw it the way you saw it. You have to, if no one ever took risk, we wouldn't advance.
Oh, nobody wants to jump first. I mean, since we're talking about movies, that's a big problem in the Hollywood industry. No one wants to be the first. I've experienced that 1,000 times over. Nobody wants to be the first. Matthew Weiner, the creator of Mad Men, talks about it all the time. You know, when he had the idea for Mad Men, and he had just come off of being an executive producer of a very successful show, Sopranos, on HBO. And he went to HBO and said, I have this great idea. Takes place in the 60s, and I want to do a slow burn. I want to start at the beginning of the 60s, and so much has happened in the 60s with an individual himself, but he works at an advertising agency, and you can see as the 60s goes on and we get to the 70s how this person changes and how his life's affected. And it's told through the allegory of advertising. And HBO was like, oh, what? No, I've never seen that before. I've never seen that done. And they pass on it. So then he goes to some other channels. No one else wants to do it. And a few networks are kind of biting because they know Sopranos was a success, but he doesn't want to do it on a network. He wants to do it his way. No one wants to jump first. A period piece on TV, a drama, just doesn't work. So finally, AMC takes a chance. They got nothing else going for them, right? They're doing a bunch of old movies, so they're thinking, oh, a period piece kind of works because all we show is old movies all day, right?
Well, and that's sort of the thing. If you have nothing to lose, take the risk.
Very true. It says a lot. So AMC takes the risk. Mad Men, the ratings weren't fantastic, but it's huge for AMC. AMC, finally, they're in the world of making scripted dramas, right? Everyone starts following suit. All these people who passed on Mad Men are trying to find the next Mad Men. They're doing like the Playboy show, which bombs. They do the show about Pan Am, right? Which bombs. They're all trying to do period pieces. And suddenly Netflix, which finds success doing this, are just littered with dramas of period pieces. No one wanted to do that before. But because someone like Matthew Weiner takes the risk, and that's just one of 1,000 stories in Hollywood. Right. No one takes a risk, even to this day. And the ones who do are the ones who succeed or find something.
But that's what makes the story of history and this film so powerful is it wasn't like an AMC who had nothing going on so they could afford to take this risk. No one in this film could actually afford to take this risk. Like the stakes were as high as they could possibly be, as we've discussed. Yeah. And they still did it. They still jumped off the cliff. So
I'm going to give you a counterpoint.
Okay.
You don't need to take absurd risks. In fact, if you want to be successful, it is about hedging your downside. And in fact, the thing that I will say that makes me look like an insane risk taker, and I'll even sometimes use that language, you got to be willing to take risks, you got to push it. to get people out of their thinking patterns. But the truth is, man, like look at our boy Richard Branson. Always talks about this. If you want to succeed, you've got to make sure that nothing is a death blow. And that's where people fuck up. And my whole thing is like what I've done, the reason I'm not at all afraid to take some of the risks that you've talked about is I don't pride myself on being right. In fact, I get joy and pride out of being willing to fail very publicly and say, like, I'm not trying to hide that. I'm not trying to run from it. I'll just own it. I'll learn from it. And I know on a long enough timeline, I'm going to win because I learned from all of those mistakes. So it's de-escalated emotionally. Like when you were going like failure, and I'm like, it doesn't affect me like that. So I get maybe like a really momentary sense of like, fuck, it sucks to fail because it stops your momentum.
Yeah.
And now you've got to like re-get things going. But the emotional part, I understand how powerful and how beneficial. I'm not playing it like, oh, like, I guess it's a learning opportunity. I'm like, okay, for real, I've seen this play out 1,000 times. I'm going to learn something from this. But the most powerful example of this is Richard Branson wants to start an airline. He's a record executive, knows nothing about airlines. So he goes to Boeing and says, hey, let me buy one of your used airplanes, but give me the right to sell it back to you at a predetermined price 2 years from now if I don't hit certain metrics. They agree to do it. And so he knows, worst case, I lose the money over the 2 years I essentially rented this airplane. So totally hedges his downside. So I think that there are financial ways to back off the risk, and there's certainly emotional ways to back off the risk. So for instance, Lisa and I are betting a very large sum of money that we can build Impact Theory into a studio, but we've allocated only the amount of money that we're actually willing to lose, knowing that, okay, we're not going to starve if we fail. We'd have to adjust our lifestyle, all of that, but I'd still not have to work again, right? So it's like You've got to find ways to de-risk. So all the people that want to build a company, they want to do something, do it on the fucking side. Like do it on the nights and weekends, figure out a path. So that's one of the reasons that this movie was so interesting is they literally paint her into a corner where it becomes a question of, is this really risk or not? And I will say it's not, because she is finally at the point where the bigger risk for anybody who recognizes that life is about brain chemistry, it is about how you feel about yourself when you're by yourself all alone. If she makes the wrong choice here, she'll never have respect for herself. So it becomes that moment where it's her defining moment. Like fate, however you want to think about it, has forced her into this chute where there's nowhere left to go. There's no like anybody there to save her, protect her, whatever. It's if I make this choice and the family business goes on and my family's taken care of, I will still feel like the failure that can't speak up, that can't stand up for herself, that all of that. So once you abstract it from a journalistic choice and it becomes a personal choice about personal pride and belief in yourself, then it's like if she really accurately identifies the situation, which given by what she did, she does, the only choice that will make her proud is to say yes. So in some ways, and look, I'm being a little cheeky here, but in some ways, it's actually the least risky move emotionally, because even if she goes to jail, she knows she was right by her own compass. All right.
Damn.
With that, I'm going to take us into our final segment. Where your thumbs at? Where your thumbs at?
Where your thumbs
we rate
at?
everything on 2 criteria. 1, was it a good movie? Just cinematically. Was it there? Great story, great storytelling. And then the other, mindset. Was there something that you can learn and extract from this film? So we give 2 rankings from down, neutral to up on both. So Dr. Finesse.
Wow, you know
where
what?
Your thumbs at?
I'm telling you, movie, fantastic. Mindset, fantastic. This movie, it's just my cup of tea. Like I said, I went to school for journalism. I graduated with a journalism degree, and I started out working in journalism. And when I say that journalism began as the watchdog of the government, I mean it. It's the truth. Look it up. Those aren't my words. That's just the truth. That's what journalism is. And in the era of people saying that there's a bunch of fake news out there, this movie couldn't come at a better time. News outlets aren't out there to tell lies. They're just not. For the most part, they're not out there to tell lies. Main news outlets that are credible, it may be slanted one way, to the right, to the left, whatever, but they're in search for the truth, and the truth is important. Do this for me when this is over. Go online, take a look at May Day, May 1st, that date, and April 30th, because there's a leak over. And pay attention. And one of the things I learned in journalism is the government, you need to be the watchdog of the government, because they will spill certain truths to you and certain lies. But there's so many secrets. and they find significance in dates. They do things on dates. But look at May Day. Take a look at it and see all the things that happen on May 1st. And question it and think about what the government is telling you and what they're saying, whatever. I'm going to keep it at that, but I'm
going to do this.
Wow.
Go ahead and do it.
Look
I'll
at
keep
this
this conversation
call to
afterwards.
action.
But remember, pay attention too. Pay attention. April 30th and May Day, May 1st. Very significant date.
All right, check that out. The truth is out there. Files, give it to us.
I think there's no question that I loved the film. I love the topic. My name is Files for a reason. X-Files, my favorite show. So anything about finding the truth, I'm all about it. So I love the movie. I've talked about some of the actual film choices that I loved. I loved Meryl Streep's performance. It was great. And then mindset, huge thumbs up. Meryl's transformation from the fumbling, nervous person she is at the beginning of the film to the badass she is by the end is just amazing. And I think there's so many things in the film you can learn from. So 2 enthusiastic thumbs up.
Nice. So for my first thumb, I will say that even though this film could have been better for me, I'm definitely judging it in its own class. So this is a great movie, and there's no question that it deserves a thumbs up. I secretly wish that it had been fully about her transformation, and had been more a film around female empowerment rather than that really occupying in a more meaningful way in the final third. But this is 3 and more, quite frankly, but 3 very visible, very great talents in their prime. So it's unarguably, I think, a great film. And then mindset perspective, for that one sequence of scenes around that choice alone, this film will get you thinking about things that matter in an insanely powerful way. Watch this to understand human transformation, what it means to take risk, and to really bet on yourself, and to recognize that at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is making choices that make you feel good about who you are when you're alone. And they go into that in spades in some of the most beautiful ways cinematically. Files, you described it really wonderfully with just some simple camera choices, some profound acting, just all around. It was very, very well done. All right, so that's where our thumbs at. Thank you guys so much for joining us for this episode of Real Impact. We hope that you have engaged in the comments. Let us know what you think. What would you have done? All of that stuff. We read the comments. We want to know what you guys are thinking. We love the high engagement. If this added any value, if you think that this is interesting, if it's a cool way to approach film breakdowns and film criticism, please do share this. We're trying to make this ecosystem as big as we can. So go ahead, share this bad boy right now. We'll wait. All right. If you haven't already yourself, be sure to subscribe. And until next time, my friends, be legendary. Take care.